Welcome to episode 4 of our podcast, This Conversation Matters podcast. And I'm Dr. Susan Protasio, your host. And today we have a very good topic to discuss. It is the Asian American family dynamics, healing intergenerational wounds. And I would like to welcome back Dr. Ernely Navarro. She was my guest for episode 2 and 3, and we were discussing then belonging and fitting in, and then immigration trauma, understanding the immigration trauma. So Dr. Ernely Navarro is a licensed clinical social worker with 43 experience and serves as a cultural community liaison for Riverside University Health System and a community resiliency model teacher. Welcome back, Dr.
Thank you.
Ernely.
It's good to be back. I've been looking forward to continuing our conversation. The last time, it always seemed like there's more to say, but I'm glad that we have this time to just focus on this particular topic.
Yeah. We had a very engaging conversation. So can you introduce further yourself?
Well, as I previously mentioned, I am, Filipino American immigrant who came here at 14. But in my work as a cultural community liaison, as well as a leadership coach, I work with diverse groups of Asian Pacific families, and then of course I have my own lived experience as an Asian American in terms of family dynamics, family relationship, all of that. So
good, thank you. And then I came across an article, and it says the Filipinos comprise the 4th largest national immigrant group after Mexicans, Indian, and Chinese. So you could just imagine how this migration has impacted the Filipino family. So what can you say about like the multi-generational household with regards to like affecting or influencing the Asian American family dynamics? How does it affect?
Right. So for us, it's common to have multi-generation in one household, right? So instead of just one nuclear family,
you have
even adults, stay longer than most American families. And so having, 2-3 generation in one household, there's a lot of different things that happen. And often because of the different experiences that we bring with us, then there's conflict that comes up within the family because of some of the different beliefs, different opinions, and of course being able to retain, some of the culture and values doesn't always align, and so then again, it creates that conflict within the family as well. So.
Well, I think probably the other reason too is that it creates a conflict is like my mom. I would say we normally call her like the old school, she grew up like the old school. And now her kids, our perspective is different, but then my mom would persist on her own perspective. So I think that's one thing that I see. And also, we had this in a meeting, one guy, a Filipino, he was saying, how do I interact with my son, because he always tells me, Dad, you have to meet me halfway. So in that situation, what would you say,
So before we go there, I want to address one of the things that you said earlier.
Right.
So the example that you gave is typical, like with a lot of different families, right? Because each generation, there's different experience, different values, and that we have for each. But with the Asian family specifically, one of the other challenges is that when have the different rates of acculturation. So then we have this acculturation stress that's associated with being immigrants. So again, being able to really understand the impact of acculturation and how that creates differences in how we relate to each other, how we communicate with each other, and then of course our beliefs, like I said earlier, could be clashing or not aligned and not consistent to some of the ways that we are raised. And so there's a lot of feeling misunderstood, almost feeling victimized because we don't feel valued or appreciated. And it goes both ways, you know. So for me, like I was sharing earlier, as a first generation immigrant, I actually, you know, I'm the oldest of four. So the children, um, you know, acculturated faster.
Yes.
You know, so immigrant children, you know, acculturate
Yes.
faster, especially, of course, if they're born here.
Right.
This is all they know,
Yeah.
than the parents. And so even though we all migrated the same time, my whole family, for my parents, it was very different in terms of how they adjusted to their life. But they were also focused on surviving, working and
Yes.
providing for
Yeah.
the family. For us, you know, we had that luxury, you know, of just enjoying our youth, you know, meeting friends,
life
going
is
to
not as hard
school.
as before.
Yeah, and so, and I think that at the time, I didn't really appreciate what they were going through. Because it wasn't something that they, of course, shared. They wanted to shield us and protect us from seeing that pain and suffering they were going through of having to give up their career in the Philippines and coming here.
Yeah.
But there's also that other pressure, you know, for you know, because they gave up so much, for us to succeed, you know, to have that better life,
better
that
life,
dream,
yeah.
that American
The
dream that they had
yeah.
for us,
Yes.
right? It wasn't so much our American dream, but it was their American dream of providing us with better education, better life. And of course, then we developed our own dream. But again, there's some of that misunderstanding in terms of what that dream they have for us versus now learning to figure out what our own dreams are. You know, so for example, you know, of course, typical, right, with, you know, both my parents were accountants, and so the pressure to be in
accountant.
more of the science, you know, medicine, all of those. And so and then me, I chose to be a social worker. So not like, they don't know, like, is that a career?
Yeah.
Is that, you know, how are you going to make a living? They're just worried. But I had to fight for that, you know, and so that fighting, you know, it's that other conflict of having to say, this is what I want to do with my career. You
but
know,
they're looking at it from a different perspective.
Yeah, they're looking at it from like making sure that, okay, you know, that whole wanting to succeed and being able to make sure that we don't experience what they experience, you know. But as a teen, you don't see it in that lens.
You don't see it, yeah.
You know, you don't.
You don't.
And so again, it's being able to really have some awareness and understanding of that. Yeah. But in this process, because we don't communicate effectively, or we don't even share really, you know, that part of our experiences. So there's a lot of mistrust, or that trust is broken because of that. And so that, you know, when you use the title wounding, that's where some of the wounding comes from, you know, because then we don't feel valued, we don't feel loved. Or our parents don't feel appreciated. We don't feel appreciated for what we, you know, what we bring in also. So it's both sides.
But I think it's hard to kind of like let them see your perspective is different from theirs. Like my mom, she has experienced all these hardships during her time in the Philippines. And then when she comes here, she would always say it and mention it in a way that I would say, Ma, you're always complaining, because my perspective is different. But then now that we are discussing it, and in our previous episodes, we have already discussed those different kinds of trauma. So how can we make our family members kind of increase the awareness that, hey, her perspective is real from her point of view, and my perspective is real from my point of view, but how do I recognize and appreciate that instead of being dismissive?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, so your example, and then the other guy that you were talking about, the son asking to meet halfway, really at the very core of it is empathy.
Okay.
And so if we're looking at being able to put ourselves in someone else's shoes and listening with understanding without judging,
So
it's
that's where you start.
where you have to start there.
Yeah, okay.
Is having that empathy. So and rather than just looking at it from your
Perspective,
perspective
yeah.
and how you feel wronged or victimized, but of course not to dismiss that there are
Right.
situations where there
Yeah.
are family violence, but it just that part of being misunderstood or not being heard.
Yeah, I
So
think that's the
because I
point.
think that's the piece is that
Yeah.
when people start giving you advice or like, oh, you don't have to worry,
Yeah.
why, that's that judgment, like, and so as opposed to just listening and then and without judgment and then really feeling what it must be like,
Right,
so if I
right.
had the skills even at 14, we can develop empathy. I mean, we have empathy for
Yeah.
dogs, when we see they're not, or
Yeah,
for
yeah.
babies,
Yes.
so we, those are skills that we can learn, what we learn growing up, and then we can develop. So, but we won't, it's hard to empathize if they're not sharing, so that's the other part is that we're not sharing, all
Well,
those our emotions
yes.
or our struggles, and so I wouldn't know, what you're
Yeah,
going through
yeah,
if you didn't share it
yeah,
with me, so that it doesn't even give me the opportunity to empathize.
yeah.
And so it goes both ways, so the kids also are not sharing,
Right, right.
because they're scared
They're
or,
scared, yeah.
they, or that's why that son was saying, meet me halfway,
Yeah.
because really he's just trying to reach out,
Yeah.
can you reciprocate?
Right. It's like, can you not see me there?
So
You see me
then
there.
just
Yes.
reciprocate, like instead of that
Yeah.
whole power
Yes.
dynamics that
That
we
I'm the
have,
father that
like
you have
I'm
to
the dad,
follow.
I'm the authority,
Yeah.
which, yes, we have respect for our elders and we value that, but respecting our elders, respecting authority doesn't necessarily mean that
That you
authority can't be empathetic, towards another
Yeah.
person, especially their child,
Right.
you know.
But I think another reason probably that caused this, problem or conflict within the family is in the Filipino culture, we are not expressive. We were not trained to, hey mom, hey dad, I
Yeah.
have this. We were not trained like that. There was a time I was asked to be one of the judges in judging this essay contest among the teens, but among the youth. And I think one or two youth created a very nice essay, and in the essay they stated that if they have a problem and they'll tell the parents would just ignore it and say, "Oh, stop thinking about it. Just go and study, and
Yeah.
you will be fine." So they
Yeah.
were like frustrated because I have
Yeah.
this feeling, and my mom just tell me, "Oh,
Yeah.
just stop it."
Yeah.
So I think that is the part also that's causing the conflict, because for whatever reason, because probably we were, what you call colonized by the Spaniards, where you need to,
Well,
not
it was
answer
our
back.
unhealthy way of coping.
So
I know sometimes we mislabel it as resilience, and yes, it helped us survive,
but it's not.
but it's not healthy. That whole like, okay, just dismiss it, that's it,
Right.
move on.
Yeah.
It is like a resiliency skill in a way that we had, and we call it that, but it's not the healthy
Healthy
kind of
one.
resiliency skills. It's more of a survival. We had to survive
For that moment,
to
yeah.
all of those things, and so that's part of what that a lot of times we see our youth problem as like, oh, no big deal, like when I was growing up, that whole comparative,
Yes, yes.
like we can't compare suffering. My suffering as a youth
It's
is
totally,
suffering.
yeah.
That's how I feel. Like your suffering is your suffering. So there's no like, what they call, Olympics of suffering, where there's a competition.
Different.
It's like, that's why empathy is so, crucial, is really understanding. So for that child, that is traumatic. For me as an adult, I don't see
Yes,
it that
yeah.
now. But, and then, again, and then also giving credit for the youth to understand that, yeah, mom and dad suffer too. or worry or distress, and just that way they can learn, like, oh, how does mom and dad navigate and cope with their stress, and hopefully it's in a healthy way. And that's part of what we want to make sure that we educate parents,
Right.
so, and everybody in the family on healthy coping skills.
Because each family member has different way of communicating. Some can be open, some can be timid, some doesn't even open.
Yeah.
So when my niece was very young, they're mischievous, they're kids. So she would do something, and then I say, "What did you do?" And she will not say anything, and then I will reassure her, "I'm not gonna do anything. I'm not gonna punish you. Nothing else. Just tell me the truth, and it's okay. Just tell me the truth." And then she would open up.
Yeah,
so
and
probably
that's,
same.
yeah. Well, yeah, and it's like that whole, again, that what did you do is judgmental also.
Yeah.
And kind of the same way that we, a lot of times we say, what's wrong with you?
What's wrong with
right?
you?
So that's also another judgment. Instead, I think we need to change our language and say, what's happening to you? What happened to you? So if you have, that lens of really understanding, then it opens up, like, okay, yeah, something is not right.
You give them that space to be able
as
to,
opposed to what's wrong
with
or
you?
what did you do? Like, it's already the blaming, as
like,
opposed to something is happening, something's not quite right.
Right.
How can I help you, and how can I be there to support you?
Yeah.
So it's a very different way of the language and how to communicate, without judgment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's good. I like that. But then, of course, our culture, it always plays into that. But probably at a certain point, if someone in the family would start to look at that way, then probably everyone would say, yeah, I think you're right. Why we don't look at it from your lens? That lens looks like, we're able to kind of resolve this wounds or whatever conflict we have.
Yeah. So, empathy also goes with compassion. So it's that other piece. So empathy and compassion. So that showing compassion, for that person who is suffering, but that person who's, doing the best they can with what they have, with what they know, and as opposed to like, oh, it's not enough, right? So that conversation we had before about not feeling you're enough, because there's more that you can always well, at this time, I am doing the best I can,
that's
with what
true.
I have, with what I know.
Yeah.
So having that compassion, and grace, right? Because we always talk about giving someone grace, and for that. And then for myself, I also need to practice self-compassion.
Right.
That we have that shared common humanity, of being imperfect or having, that pain and suffering that. And as well as strength and resilience, but we, the same way that, because I think a lot of times that parent-child dynamic, we demonize our parents and we feel victimized. And so if we just have this common humanity that, like, our parents are human too, so they also have, they've also gone through childhood and then, all of that. So, and so just reminding each other of the common humanity that we share, in these different experiences, and practicing, kindness to ourselves, and then of course to the other person is huge part. And just really also being mindful about, what's happening to me and how is this impacting me, and just being in the present moment. And so that whole compassion, self-compassion are two other pieces that we need to heal, those wounds. And then, of course, forgiveness. So forgiveness is also at the very core of a lot of that, that we're talking about. So if you, being able to then restore the trust and the love is looking, being able to have the opportunity to find forgiveness.
That's a lot to kind of navigate into, because it's very complex. If you think about it, it's very complex, that kind of relationship, because in our household, like the Filipino household, it's multi-generational, right? So everyone, they have their own thing going on, everyone is busy. So they may not have the time to kind of look and like reflect. So
Yeah.
they just tend to live the everyday life
Yeah.
and keep going without
Yeah.
sitting and taking the time and say, hey, okay, what's going on
Yeah.
here, you know? Everything
Yeah.
is fast-paced.
Well, and it is, and but that is
Mhm.
part of the experience with a lot of immigrant parents have, right? They're just in a survivor mode, of being able to provide for the family, to do, and so all of these other things, they see as a luxury. Oh, I don't have time for that. But I think that really shifting again is being able to shift your mindset to know that you beyond just survival, you want to be able to thrive and grow, and so that for you're doing it, the same way that they came here for the American dream, opportunities for the kids. This is part of that, so being able to give our kids the opportunity to be themselves, and then also to be heard, to experience that love and belonging. It comes, not just the success with money and career, that it's been so ingrained in us, of part of that American dream,
To have, when you get employed, you need to make this much money, you need to get several
Yeah.
jobs at the same time,
Yeah.
and then just keep going.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I think it was ingrained to us the moment you migrated here. You have your mind is like, I need this job, I need to have this much, and get this big house, those kinds of things. So I wonder, how does what are the coping mechanisms that the family members can use, or like resources that can resort to.
Well, so in the community, again, there are different parenting. A lot of times I think we think that just because you give birth that you automatically, as a parent, you know all the things that you're going to know. But our parenting skills we learn from our parents or observing other people. Well, we already know from studies and science that there are certain things that are helpful, with being able to develop the communication better or the relationship with your kids. And so there are parenting classes that are tailor-made specifically for Asian families, and Filipino families that incorporate culture, and really being able to help them navigate, the differences. And so that's what I would highly, highly recommend. And of course, practicing self-compassion. There's resources on that. Dr. Christian Neff is one of the experts on self-compassion. So she has a website that talks about self-compassion. So that you can learn a little bit more on that. And then definitely all of the other things that I've previously talked about on developing resiliency skills, as far as more coping skills and understanding that. So that's from the Trauma Resource Institute, and they have workshop and also their app, the iChill app. So all of these, if we just add all and then for once, because a lot of times it's not easy to navigate. So being able to have family therapists who understand the culture, to understand, the different dynamics that's happening, that could also be helpful. For some families who are ready for that, is engaging in family therapy as well.
That's a lot. I would say that's a lot. It's hard. And then one thing also that I've noticed in the Filipino culture, no, not all the parents, but I would say probably baby boomers, they're so fixed on their perspective. So I wonder, how can we make them, I know there are resources, but how can we make them open up and see that, hey, this nowadays, these are the things that are offered that, that would help you, because that fixed perspective sometimes becomes the conflict within the family, especially if there are like a lot of younger, family members. So how do we navigate through that to let them kind of inspire them or motivate them to see the other perspective?
Yeah, it comes with that awareness, that this way of thinking is not working anymore. That it really is impacting the relationship with other people. And so, and really our brain is so elastic, no? I mean, it we can continue to to grow. And so it doesn't have to be what they call fixed mindset, that our brain really has the capacity to
Right.
learn and adjust, so being able to know that.
Yeah, yeah. So so from that point of view, how do we proceed towards healing aside from the empathy and the compassion? So how do we proceed towards the healing?
Well, yeah. So, as an individual, I also have to kind of work
Yes.
through my own healing
Yeah.
individually.
Right.
Again, and we have already talked about some of that
Yeah.
as far as with the family, with forgiveness, as one of the essential piece, because then you have to restore, or rebuild the trust, that
Yes.
was broken, and then of course, being able to then through empathy, compassion, all of that piece is part of that. And then if you need professional help, then of course
Yeah.
there's always that. But a lot of the work is just also within us, you
Yes.
know.
I think the seeking professional help, I think that's a big factor too, because sometimes, like in a family, you sit together, you try to iron out differences, but sometimes there will become a time that nothing came out of that meeting, nothing came out of discussion. So probably, I think we need to put someone in that's neutral and would see what's going on. And I think the family therapist or a therapy would probably benefit that kind of situation.
Right. So that's facilitating that conversation,
Right.
and providing additional,
Yeah.
education and awareness. So giving structure, so that everyone feel heard
Yeah.
is part of what the benefit of having family therapy.
Yeah.
Intergenerational,
Healing.
therapy in a way. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, those are. It makes it challenging, because again, in Asian culture, we want to keep the
Yeah.
problem within
Yes.
the family and not talk to stranger.
Yeah,
but then
I know someone, she's a Filipina, and I think she needs some therapy or counseling, and I asked her, would you like to consider it? And her answer was no, and she said, I'm fine, but I know she's not fine. But say, would you like to consider it? Okay, let me know next time, I'll talk to you, and let's see if you want to consider it. But she's very adamant.
Yeah, so I
So
think
it's hard.
it's like for me it's one of those things like if we could just give them like sound bites, like even like in an app like to learn awareness, or even like a mini workshop, just to and so
kinda
like
see
put like a
see.
progression. It's like, oh, maybe this is not so bad, after all, so it's really exposing them to those different option, because talk therapy is not just one way. There's
Yeah.
a lot of other ways too.
Yeah. I know. Well, what our discussion has been an eye opener for me, because looking back, I always talk to my mom, and then she would say all the challenges she had, and sometimes I would say, "Wow, you're always complaining." But now looking at it, that is not complaining. That's her perspective. And so if people probably would listen more when someone is saying that, and kind of just, okay, where is this person coming from, right? And then hopefully that would help, whatever is going on in the family, or not dismiss it,
Right.
or so the other person would feel like, okay, she heard me, there's like she valued my opinion or whatever. Yeah, so, well,
Yeah.
thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. This is a very, very nice, engaging discussion,
Yeah.
and I hope our listeners or our audience were able to learn from us. So, is there anything else that you need to add?
Well, yeah, and you know this, and so
Yeah.
there's a lot to talk about here. So, we are planning a workshop.
Yes.
And thanks to your connection that you were able to connect with me to offer in the community. So I know that we want to be able to encourage everyone to, it's free,
it's
to
free.
attend that workshop. So yeah.
So, for our audience, we would like to let you know, on May 17, 2025, from 8:30 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. at the Diocesan Pastoral Center here in San Bernardino, there will be a seminar workshop on intergenerational dialogue in family. And our keynote speaker is, of course, Dr. Edeline
Yeah.
Navarro. and see, you would hear more information from her on that day. And their activities, their activities, it says here, build stronger relationships to foster understanding and respect between different generations.
Yeah.
And then share wisdom, exchange valuable life experiences and knowledge, and create memories, enjoy meaningful conversations and other activities together. So it is really geared towards intergenerational interaction in the family.
Yeah, and I'm just one of the speakers, so there are other speakers as well that you'll hear from, you know, for
so,
different perspective.
Yeah, so we hope we'll see you there. So thank you so much for listening to this episode. I hope you learned something from our discussion, and I will see you again in the next episode. Thank you so much, and take care and blessings.